San Diego County is known for being one of America's most expensive regions. Locals are feeling the squeeze and looking for solutions. KPBS's new series, Price of San Diego, delves into the rising cost of groceries, childcare, car insurance, and even our beloved California burrito. You won't want to miss this ongoing series live now at kpbs.org/Price of San Diego.
Welcome in San Diego. It's Jade Hindman. On today's show, as Donald Trump tosses the idea of nationalizing elections around while voter suppression laws are being weighed, we'll hear from California's Secretary of State, Shirley on the safety of California elections. This is KPBS Midday Edition, connecting our communities through conversation. So the midterm elections are 9 months away. President Trump has repeatedly said the federal government should nationalize or take over some state elections. California officials are resisting those calls. They say they're ready to fight back. Joining me now is California Secretary of State Shirley Weber. Secretary, welcome to Midday Edition.
Thank you for the invitation to be with you.
Glad to have you here for this conversation. Let's start with a quick refresher. How does the Constitution lay out the relationship between state elections and federal control?
Well, clearly, the state is the group that puts that there are rules and regulations that govern elections overall in terms of the state, the right of individuals to vote, so forth and so on, those kinds of things. Federal election, not necessarily in the state elections. So those things are laid out before us, but it gives the authority to implement and to run elections to the states. Each state has its own rules and regulations within the Constitution, within its Constitution, as well as the federal Constitution, that talks about what happens in an election. We're responsible for implementing those elections. Every Californian every registered voter or citizen has a right to vote, and so we have to implement that. We can't violate the Constitution in doing those things. But we have the authority to actually run the elections, and most of the states run their own elections, generally by the broad rules and regulations that govern them. But they can change them. For instance, California does vote by mail. Every voter in California, registered voter, gets a ballot in the mail. Some states don't have that. They have limitations as to who can get a vote by mail ballot, who cannot, all those kinds of things. The federal government governs the fact that we vote the second Tuesday of November, certain elections on every 2 years, so forth and so on. But states can have other rules and regulations concerning when elections take place that are local elections, whether it's city council, school board, all those things are within the local jurisdiction of the state, and sometimes even within the cities themselves. LA has a different time frame for its mayoral election versus others having other time frames. So this responsibility is parceled out with the broader idea that everyone has a right to vote who's a citizen in the United States, and those kinds of things. But they vary based on the different jurisdictions that are there. And people have a tendency to appreciate the fact that they have the level of control to decide when they're going to do their local elections.
So Trump says, Republicans should nationalize voting in at least 15 places, including California. I'm curious, what's your reaction, and what is California's plan to resist those efforts?
Well, we will resist them in the courts because the courts are fairly clear about our responsibility to do our elections. He's appealing to the Republicans in the Congress to basically pass some kind of federal law that would make us have to basically be under the controls of the federal government. Most counties, do not want that, even in the red states that he didn't identify, because they like control over their own too as well. They may not vocalize it as much as some others have, but they like the fact that they can have some level of control about how they're districting their state, how they can decide how long you can be in term, whether you have 2 years, 4 years, whether you have limited terms, all those things. States enjoy that because each one is a little different. They're structured differently. They have some states that have far between one place to the next because of places like Wyoming that has very few people and yet would not like to have so many elections and so many other kinds of things. So it's not a popular idea. It's a popular idea with him. And it's interesting that he's identified the Democratic states as the ones that he believes should be under control of the federal government and not the others, mainly because he believes at some point that he controls the others. So we are definitely opposed to it. We'll be like we were when they asked us to basically give us all of our data of everybody that's registered in California and their backgrounds and their social security numbers and those kinds of things. We fought that because that's within the control of the state of California, and we won. And so they can't demand that from us, and they really couldn't demand it from anyone else in terms of the other states. But we fought it. So our thing is that we will fight it. Our people are not in favor of turning over their elections to the federal government, given the turmoil and the shutdowns and the open ups and all other kind of stuff they've come up with. It's not a good idea for any of us to talk about giving something to the federal government that we have demonstrated time and time again that we do and do well.
Could a legal battle over this hem up midterms at all?
No, it's not going to take over midterms. First of all, this is his idea. This is not a bill that's coming out of Congress. This is one of his thoughts, as always. He throws these things out knowing that one, it may not even be popular with their own people, and you don't hear them talking about federalizing elections. So it's not necessarily popular with them, but it gets attention. And once it gets attention and kind of fizzles around for a while, then it may just die out. But this is something that he's recommending as in some executive order that they should federalize the elections. And that sounds too much like other countries that we've heard about, that where the elections are really up for grabs, where you can constantly have an election over and over and over again, or when the president decides he wants to call an election, he can call an election in Zimbabwe and other places. People are hearing him, but that is not a popular idea. Every person has ever mentioned to me, like, why in the world would anybody do that? I said, you're absolutely correct. So we do not plan to. We plan to fight any effort at this in terms of federalizing the election. It won't have anything to do with the primaries that are coming up. People are too nervous about the primaries to start messing with it because it might even create a backlash in terms of where people are and find themselves, in worse conditions than the conditions they believe they will be in terms of the upcoming elections.
Also, the DOJ recently filed a lawsuit against California demanding sensitive voter information, and that lawsuit was rejected by a judge last month. Why do you think California is such a target for the Trump administration?
Well, keep in mind, California has always been the outlier. California is the fourth largest economy in the world, and that says a lot about the resources that exist in California. Um, the state is a blue state, a very blue state, and the more activities we see occurring, it becomes even more blue. So California has its own voice, its own way of doing things. It does it by its own constitution, as well as every state should, its own constitution, as well as by the federal constitution. We have resources. We're not about to surrender our stuff over. And so when this whole idea came up about giving us the federal, all of our data, it came to my office, that was rejected. I spent the last 6, 7 months fighting the federal government on this particular issue. They eventually sued me, and we won. Because we knew that this issue of privacy and data, I mean, data is power. So the fact that you want to take data and then just kind of shovel it around, which is almost what's happening now, you find yourselves in a position where somebody's reading your material, utilizing your material to their best interest. And clearly, this is a part of it. When you see what happened in Montana, where it's not Montana, but Minneapolis, where they say, well, if you give us this, then if you give us all your data, we'll go away. ICE will go away. How crazy can that be? ICE and the data have nothing to do with each other, other than they want the data to be able to use it as they choose, to make decisions about what happens in local elections, what happens in local jurisdictions, what happens in universities and schools. We've seen this effort to try to take over everything. And so we're not likely to, this is not a friendly conversation about give us your data. This is actually an attack on California and any other state. And many states have rejected giving the data because they have no idea what this data would do. And they've seen some examples of it, and even walking in and taking data and material out of Georgia again after 4 or 5 years. I mean, this is just, this is an agitation, but it's a serious agitation, and it's a serious attack on the various other states. And clearly it's an attack on California. This president is upset that California says no. It says no to ISIS coming in without certain kinds of without rules and regulations concerning it. It says no to a host of things that have happened, and the retaliation is the federal government says, well, if you don't give us this, and we won't give you that. I mean, that kind of a childish play on state and federal resources is really undesirable, and it's unprecedented. To
But
be
now,
very honest about
but
it.
let me ask
Yeah.
you about this, because the FBI searched and seized voter rolls from the election office in Fulton County, Georgia.
Right.
Of course, Trump alleges it's tied to voter fraud, despite no evidence of that. I mean, what do you make of that action? And even though they're pursuing litigation to get those voter rolls back, there's no record of what exactly was taken.
That's a strategy that is being used and continues to be used, and that's why it's so important that states pay attention to where their material is, that they fight back on these things in up front, because they don't know what has been taken. The record is not clear. We're not sure exactly what it is, but a part of it, of course, is intimidation to reinforce to Georgia, as well as reinforce to others that, if you don't pay attention or play ball with us, we can do things to you, and that's unfortunate because, I don't know how much more you need from Georgia. You've been to court, I don't know how many times. We've seen the conservative information that coming out of these study groups, and we've seen the more liberal data that comes out in the courts and everything else. And every last one says the same thing. There is no fraud, no stealing of elections. Everyone says openly that 2020 was an election that was not stolen. And yet we still have these people who won't fight back, who basically, particularly in Congress, give things away that they shouldn't, and should respond to it. That's what the people send people to Congress for, to protect the Constitution, to protect them. And yet what they're doing is letting this person run everything. And as soon as something is said, people feel they have to adhere to it. That is not what this Constitution is about. That is not what this nation is about. People often say to me, well, I have to do this because the president said so. I said, the president is not God. He is one member of the branch of government. He is not in control of everybody. And because he says something, it doesn't make it law.
Well,
Now, we've been fortunate not to have crazy presidents in the past, but, we're in one of those eras now.
This is where we are now. Well, let me ask you this question here. You mentioned intimidation. There's been talk of ICE being at polling places. There's also this growing concern that the Trump administration will interfere in upcoming state elections. Democrats, for example, are worried that the federal government will use the U.S. Postal Service to interfere with counting mail-in ballots or even postmarking them late after the voting date. Any advice on what people can do to ensure their ballot is counted, as the rules of the game seem to be fluid?
Well, we've seen all of those efforts and all of those attempts at scaring people at various things. One of the things that California has, and now some of the other states are thinking about doing it. I tell everybody that, first of all, the one thing that we did in California, without thinking of Trump, without thinking of any of these things, but really thinking about convenience, was to provide everyone with a mail-in ballot. That is extremely important, because now you don't have to worry about meeting some ICE at your polling place, or having something taken out of your hand, or whatever you think might happen in the process, or people looking at you funny when you go into the polling place and being snatched out of there. You can vote by mail. That's number one. The issue concerning the Postal Service, the beauty is that California has these gigantic steel ballot boxes that you can put your mail in, that is picked up by our folks, not the Postal Service, but it's those big boxes that are really, most of you have seen them at the post office. We have them on every university campus. All those things, they're accessible. They're steel. They're picked up by our people. You can put your ballot in there. And so you can either mail it off in the Postal Service early, because you get 11 days to do it. And so this issue of will it get there on the actual date that you do the thing, the mailing it, you can do it in advance, do it by mail. You can basically put it in a box of boxes, of ballot boxes that are these steel things that are bigger than a post office box. You can put it in there. All of those things are possible. You can walk into the polling place the day of the election and hand it to them. You can also hand it in if you go to the post office. You can walk in the post office and ask them to postmark your ballot right there. So you stand in line and get it postmarked by ballot. So we have a number of ways that protect people from doing that. We've also during an election, we have access. We have people who roam around that are trained by us to make sure that there's no intimidation, no attacks on the individual at a polling place. We have laws that we pass to basically creating felonies for folks who attack people at the polling places, who try to deny them their right to vote. They will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. So we've done that years ago because we had people walking in and wanting to take over polling places, wanted to see what people were doing, all that kind of stuff. Once you fall into that trap of that kind of activity, you're going to basically destroy the system of voting. So when I came in office, first thing we did was create some legislation that says if you do this stuff, you start intimidating people, you start making for us to get poll workers because they're scared to go and work at the polls, you're going to be prosecuted. So that put a clamp on some of those things. So we've been kind of doing this stuff up front, but the vote mail is security for a whole lot of people.
That's great.
They might be
And
victims of ICE.
Dr. Weber, I hate to interrupt you. This is a great conversation and a lot of good information for voters here in California, reassuring information. But we'll pick up the conversation later. I've been speaking with California Secretary of State Shirley Weber. Secretary, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. You're welcome.
That's our show for today. I'm your host, Jade Hindman. Thanks for tuning in to Midday Edition. Be sure to have a great day on purpose, everyone.
KPBS On Demand is supported by ACLU of San Diego and Imperial Counties. The work of the ACLU is about closing the gap between the America that was promised and the America that is. Learn more at www.aclu-sdic.org.